Good evening and welcome to the April 6th regular board workshop meeting. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Piccolo-Antonio?
Here.
Mrs. Mooring?
Here.
Mrs. Coates?
Here.
Mrs. Horn?
Here.
Mr. Manley?
Here.
And if you all please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any recommended changes to tonight's agenda? Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Thank you, Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Coates. It looks like we have a couple items for action tonight under Human Resources and maybe in a couple other sections, but we'll start with Human Resources. Is there a motion to approve Human Resource items C1 through C2, item number C3?
So moved.
Thank you. Oh, see, I missed. Okay, can you call the roll on adoption of the agenda?
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Piccolo-Antonio?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Let's try this again. There are two items for action under Human Resources. Is there a motion to approve item number C3, which is items C1 through C2? Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Horn. Any discussion about these two items?
I'm just glad we are hiring the transportation supervisor. It's such a integral district and thanks to all the work that went into interviewing and hiring.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Piccolo-Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Motion carried.
We also have some action items under letter D, I think. Is there a motion to approve item number D3, which is approval of educational program and educational pupil programs and services D1 through D2? Thank you, Mrs. Coates. Is there a second? Thanks, Mr. Manley. Any discussion about these two items?
Yeah, I would like to understand how the Mind Education ST Math relates to the Bridges discussion that's happening later.
So the ST Math resource is for our middle school programming, whereas Bridges is specific to our K-5 programming. So is that how you see it? No?
So is Bridges not a K-8 curriculum?
No.
So how do the two interact? So is there alignment between Bridges for K-5 and Mind ST?
Yes, yes. So Bridges is rooted a lot in visualization, and ST Math stands for spatial temporal, so it's nonverbal. So any of our students can access that through the manipulation of the visualization. So in that regard, having a really good concrete understanding at elementary for visual representation and manipulation will help the work through ST a lot. So that is one way for sure.
Can I add also, so ST Math is similar to Dreambox that we have for elementary, so it's a supplemental resource that will add to the core curriculum at the middle school. It gives them that additional practice in the same way that we do Dreambox at the elementary building. It's a supplemental tool.
And it's, can I ask a question on that? So, how did we select that? So right now, aren't they, I thought they were using Dreambox in middle school. Are they now using Dreambox as the supplemental?
We use Dreambox at K through 5.
Okay. So we
Current,
weren't using anything at the middle school as supplemental.
Collectively, Middle School West has had ST Math for a very long time, and they have seen a lot of gains in the students' performance based off of their usage with ST Math. So we had been exploring it to see if we could expand it to the other two middle schools, and now we have the opportunity to be able to do that.
So that's the important piece,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
that, if that would have
Yes.
been led with bringing the rest of the
Misunderstood.
school.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
that's fine. I
Yes.
just wondered how that all related
Yes.
with Dreambox at the.
so we are bringing on a supplemental, more supportive tool now for all of our middle schoolers is the hope, because West has had it exclusively through title funds. And so South and East have not had it. And we've had the unique opportunity through ST and some work actually on their end through with GM we are the only district in Ohio and only district outside of Michigan that their GM is doing a match donorship with us to support us. And so it's come at a really great opportunity to us.
Question would be, some of the, especially you use the words visualization. I just, are this program, how is it received and used with ESL students and maybe your non-traditional student?
And you're referring to ST Math.
I'm sorry?
You're referring to ST Math, yes.
Yes,
Okay,
ST Math.
yes. So the real benefit of ST as a program, as opposed to some others, is that I spoke to that piece of it being nonverbal. So it's all through students making certain manipulation and moves. I know I'm using these words again. It's hard without like a visual representation to actually show you what that looks like. But through the use of that, it's all done through reasoning and what you're noticing and how the math can change depending on the different moves you're making with your tools. And so because there's no written or spoken direction, tips, hints, that kind of thing, they don't need to rely on language to make sense of the math.
More gamified also, so that the middle school kids like it because it's like playing games, but they're using their math reasoning to be able to do that.
One more question on funding. So you said that West was paid out of Title I funds, but we had on this that it's being paid out of ESSER. So are we paying for everything out of ESSER, some out of Title, some out of ESSER? How does the grant relate to that you mentioned, just for clarification?
So we will finish out our contract with Middle School West using title funds, and then we'll pull it all together out of ESSER. Mhm. Yeah. Yes, so the general fund will have to pick up when the ESSER funds are gone.
Yeah, I think so it says the budget fund for this
We are paying over 3 years.
No, I'm just trying to process what you're saying. So is the budget source is not only ESSER, is that right? The budget source is ESSER and general fund? Do we need to do a motion to amend, Scott?
Well, and the recommended action, what we're approving doesn't change, just the budget source does, so it's on here, so we can add that to it. It doesn't change what the recommended action is. 'Cause
It's
even
not changing the board action.
It's not changing the board action.
But you can
But we can
update the.
Correct.
So the minutes will reflect that it's not just coming from ESSER.
We'll go in here and we'll add general fund to it as
Okay.
well. For year 3, correct.
And I'm assuming, Scott, then in that year 3, when it's general funds, it's part of the 5-year plan already.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Horn? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, too quick. Did you have a question, Mrs. Horn?
It was on two, sorry.
Yeah, there's two
Two
items.
parts. So we talked about the math, but we didn't talk about school links. And I think at one point we talked about the Naviance tool, and I honestly just don't remember the statistics for like how much usage that was from just the school counselors versus the families and students. So can somebody refresh our memory on what usage has been and how we're applying that to this purchase? Because I don't remember that the usage was that high outside of, so what are we going to do would be my next question to make sure that it's utilizing if we're going to be expending the money. I don't disagree with the tool use, but my memory served me that it wasn't the best usage that we were getting, and I wasn't sure if it was because of the tool itself or just the lack of use.
So we did have low usage once we first implemented Naviance, and if you remember about 2 years ago, I think was when we had the major push to get information out to families, to get information back in front of kids early on, and so we did see an increase in usage during that year and for this year, and so we do plan on maintaining that big push of pushing out information to families, and the counselors were doing class meetings, so they were going into all of the English classes for grades 9 and 10 to start with, and then they have individual and small group meetings at 11 and 12 to keep them engaged with the platform. We plan on maintaining that for switching to School Links. The biggest difference with School Links and Naviance is just the platform in and of itself, and the user. It's more user-friendly on School Link side, and the reporting side of it is much more efficient, and it gives us much more data about the students, not only academic, but also their career interests and even their college exploration that they're doing. We're able to extract those reports a little bit better and do more things with it than we were with Naviance. That's going to help us with that career and college exploration side of it, as well as the way that they're able to help us to track graduation requirements within School Links. So, but the push on in terms of making sure that students and families are using it, that intense plan is still going to be in place with School Links.
Okay. So is it just high school for this?
For this one,
Is
it's just
there
high
any
school.
thought of pushing it to middle school as we're looking at like career exploration?
Yeah.
And just getting parents engaged at the middle school level before they even get into high school? I didn't know if that's an application that we can
It
look at, or
is,
if we're
yes.
limited to just high school.
No. So in this initial purchase, as we transition and get used to the system and the changes, it will just be high school. But again, there is going to be that follow-up where we look to bring on middle school again, and also look through the plan of getting them engaged with the usage, because that's where we had the lowest usage also, was middle school. And just so being more intentional and finding the right places to plug it in so that we do get the most use out of it at the middle school level. But yes, that is the plan.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have a couple now. Go ahead.
Can you quantify what the usage has been? I mean, I know it was low and it's supposedly improved, but what does that mean?
Yes.
Or 75?
She does. She'll get them. She'll follow up. She
Yeah,
just
I
said
will
she'll
have to pull
follow up.
those numbers for you. I don't have them with me right now.
Does anyone else have any questions? I do, if nobody else does. So you just prompted more questions from me. So Naviance was available to middle school kids. Will middle school students still have access to Naviance, or is Naviance going away entirely? Okay, my next question is unrelated to that. Naviance, my recollection is that it fed into the college application process, like the platforms connected. How does SchoolLink fit with that process so that things can be done automatically like it was through Naviance?
School Links has the same connections.
Okay.
It is a very similar platform as Naviance, does a lot of the same things that Naviance did. It's just more effective at doing those things. And so the interface is much more user-friendly. It's much better for all of people that are involved. So on the school side, on the student
The
side, on
staff
the parent side, but it does all of the same, has all the same connections and research bases and the platforms to like College App or Common App and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember, I guess what I'm wondering is from a staff perspective, because I think that the students had to go through Naviance, for example, to request letters of recommendation. So does School Links make that process any more efficient on the staff side?
Yes. And that's one of the biggest things that we noticed when we started to explore and when the counselors and I had the demo through. It is much more efficient and a better just ease of use of the platform of doing a lot of the things that we had with Naviance. Naviance was just much more clunky in a lot of the different areas. And so it is going to be streamlined for everyone, again, on the staff side and student and family side.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I'm glad to hear that it's less clunky because a couple of years ago went through it with both and it is extremely clunky. So I'm excited that School Links is not that.
Mrs. Mooring?
I just want to confirm. So the $25,000 is over 3 years, or is that per year?
That's a per year.
Per year? Well, yeah, you can't, that's what I'm trying to understand, what is what.
Sorry. So for Naviance, will there be a void in the middle school then? And how are we addressing the void if middle school had the use of that? Again, I mean, I look at it as middle school is the prime time to engage the parents prior to getting into high school, because then things just kind of get a little crazy with high school. So the more that we can get them on a path in middle school for usage. So how are we proposing to address that?
Yeah, so one of the main things that the middle school students used Naviance for was for the interest surveys and the career interest surveys that they had in there. And so we have a number of different options that we can use from that. Several of them are free. We have Ohio Means Jobs that is a free application. And then some of the counselors at the buildings and some of the teachers, they have interest-based surveys that they also give to the students at different points and times of the year. So we will be able to pull those together to maintain that component of it until we cycle the middle school back in. We just felt like it was better to have that transition as this is a completely new system, getting things up and running, making sure we understand how it's working before we pulled middle school in, so that we can have that plan completely finalized. So that was just our original thinking.
Additional questions? Do you know what specifically the information that you're going to follow up with Mrs. Mooring on?
The usage for Naviance.
Okay. Yep, that's what I was trying to, so I'm trying to, it was usage for Naviance once we increased communication to families. Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, we are on letter E. Items from our Chief Operating Officer. There is one item for action. Is there a motion to approve item number E1, approval of a secured entry project at Middle School West? Thanks, Mrs. Coates. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion about this item? Go ahead, Mrs. Horn.
So, I noticed that we're paying it out of ESSER funds, and I know what the answer is going to be, but I still have to say it. why are we using ESSER funds and not like the security funds of the grants that we just had or permanent improvement funds? Because I keep going back to the pure nature of what we should be using ESSER funds in regards to student learning and getting over everything that happened with the pandemic. So
So, we have a significant amount of ESSER funds going toward addressing the learning loss. We have many staff members, many software programs, after-school tutoring, summer enrichment programming, a pretty robust amount of support and plan to be addressing that. There's also availability within the allowable expenses to do other things to support the district. And so, we're always looking for ways to utilize the money smart and effectively. And, I think the other thing to consider is, we could bring in 2 or 3 more resources for this $89,000, but we have to also make sure staff have the capacity to learn it and use it in the classroom and all of those types of things. So it's just trying to balance the right amount of support, the right amount of resources, the right amount of staff, and also support PI and other projects going on in the district. That's what I would start with. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Would add to is, though, it is a qualified expense, and as an enclosure to the building envelope and a secured entryway, it certainly qualifies, and I think it does help offset other funding sources we can use with greater flexibility. So we have much more work to do that we can use those PI funds for, so.
And the safe.
on record that I'm totally supportive of the project itself. It's not related to that. It's all about the funding source. So, I mean, I know that it doesn't seem possible that we're already in April, and it was probably last April when we got the last update on like the scores and everything. So I just want to be mindful of like knowing where we're at, because we haven't received another update. I can't believe it's been a year already. You know what I mean? Time just has a way of going by quickly, and I just want to make sure that.
You're talking about the assessments of
Yes.
students,
Yeah.
academic assessments.
And I hear all of your points, and they're totally valid. I just want to make sure that we're all focused on that part of it as well. I mean, that's really it.
Yeah, I think another thing I would add, really, I touched on it, but even just staff capacity. We've had a significant amount of money set aside for after-school tutoring, and we don't have staff to run those programs because they're taxed and they're stressed and they're, so it's, we've had to do some shifting, and the money we allocated in certain places didn't end up getting expended, so we were able to bring on, things like this. But we could definitely, have some discussions about the academic data and the progress for sure, because that's our top priority, so that makes sense.
Did you have a question, Mrs. Mooring?
Would you be kind enough to just describe what these paragraphs actually mean from a brick and mortar perspective? Like, what's happening to the entry at West?
Basically, it's a storefront enclosure, so it's a glass insert that's going to go in right where the entrance is currently. And it'll just be offset probably roughly a foot into the entryway into West. So it'll just be a slight bump in, and then it's going to be airtight, and the reception area will still be able to allow people to go through the visitor process of vetting entry from their current station. So,
Having volunteered there and my children gone there, that hallway is extremely busy. So how many feet are we taking out of that hallway in
less
the
than
front?
roughly a foot, I would estimate. I've got the drawings here, and they tried to meet all of the code requirements in the flow and kind of have it be, it's just a subtle intake to complete the enclosure. So,
Is this a Band-Aid or a long-term solution?
this will work for the long term. It's designed to function that way.
This was a way to create a secured entrance for Middle School West without taking classroom space away. And some of the original planning was not going to pass fire code restrictions. And so this is the best way to provide a secured entrance as a retrofit to a building that's already standing.
In addition to that, the reason it costs a little bit less than our others is that we're not having to reconfigure the office space to accommodate the entry. So that's why the cost is down just a little bit as well.
So let me see if I understand. The doors open out towards the outside, right? Then there's going to be a 1-foot glass wall once you step into that space.
You'll step in and you'll do your visitor, the Raptor system when you
Right.
check in.
And so that'll stay outside,
That'll
right?
be in the vestibule.
It'll be inside that,
Mhm.
in this 1-foot space. And
Actually, the vestibule is more than 1 foot. It only bumps into the hallway about a foot from the. Yeah, it starts from outside into the entryway.
Oh, okay.
That's why, I'm sorry, I'm,
primarily
an Yes. outside
vestibule.
Yes. Yes, that's, it's an insert.
Okay, all right.
So
Thank you.
where the overhang is currently is where it will start, the very first door that they will come in, and then the second door will be about a foot into the hallway. And that will open in so that it doesn't open out into the hallway and cause any other issues as students are passing by.
Would you say it's kind of similar to what we did years ago to the high school with
Yes,
this,
very similar.
Right.
Yep.
the main entrance of the high school, to have that secured point where visitors can check in? It's very
So-
similar to that.
So there's that 10-foot depth.
And I'm not sure it's going to be the same
It'll be
depth,
roughly
but-
10 feet, and it has to be able to accommodate ADA. So anybody that would have any mobility issues would be able to come in, and the door will be opened by the secretary.
Right.
They'll come in, they'll do the Raptor, and then the door will then be opened again by the secretary from a remote button for them to enter the school. So we will have a two, it's important for us to have two looks at anybody coming in. Outside is the first look, and then doing the Raptor system is the second look.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Manley? Yes. Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn? Motion carried.
We are on director reports and discussions, and we are going to start with a report from curriculum team, Mrs. Holloman and Mrs. Soriano.
Good evening, Madam President and Board. Thank you for having us this evening. Excited to do another presentation. This time we are here to talk about our math curriculum and specifically the vetting process that we've had recently for our elementary math curricular tool. And so I have with me our math curriculum coordinator, Mrs. Sharon Soriano, and she's going to facilitate this presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Holloman. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Board. Thank you very much for your time this evening. As I mentioned in the October SLA meeting, I'd be coming to you this spring with an update to our elementary math core resource review and my next step recommendations. So just to give a quick brief history of our latest years, let's first recap on the timeline of the most recent elementary math resource reviews and adoptions. 8 years ago, in 2015-16, we had our last review. The three resources that were finalists at that time were Bridges, Investigations, and Stepping Stones. It was decided that we would use Investigations. The following year, in 2016-17, was the implementation year for Investigations K through 5. This current school year, it was time for an updated review for a variety of reasons. We originally purchased a 6-year license of Investigations, which is pretty standard for a math resource adoption. Last year was our final year in that license and would have been the time to review and decided to continue with Investigations and renew a longer contract, or if we would vet new resources. A vetting process takes time and attention, and as we all know, The 2021-22 school year was not the year to add anything that was non-essential for an education community. So we renewed one more year until we could settle this year. Before we continued to renew, we needed to make sure the core tool we were using was meeting our needs, and if not, vet other resources. And that leads us to this year. So one crucial component of this process this year was our boots on the ground teachers. They are the ones leading instruction beside our students and communicating with our families. So I want to thank these teammates who make up our K through 5 math leadership teams. These are 6 total teams, 1 for each grade level. On these teams, we have representation from each school. This ensures we have a voice from every dynamic in our district, and it also provides a liaison to and from every K-5 math teacher. One role of our MLT members is to transfer information between district level and school level teams, get feedback, and give that voice back to the other team. We started together in this past fall in a broad level-setting structure to establish our district math priorities we needed in a resource and to begin the steps for creating an evaluation rubric. I'll be sharing more about their role in a moment. So from that broader MLT group, we then pared down and created this math resource vetting team. So all of these vetting team members are also on that broader math leadership team group. We began our next phase of our vetting journey. It was important that we had people with their eyes and ears focused on each grade level. It was also important that we had lenses from teachers at all 7 of our buildings and within K2 and 3-5 bands in their building. Our instructional coaches were crucial members of the team as they learned beside their teachers and supported piloting lessons back in the classrooms. There was also an intentional expertise represented in the group, which included an intervention specialist, an EL teacher, a gifted intervention specialist, our gifted coach, a school psychologist, a principal, and the math curriculum coordinator, myself. This was the group that did a deep dive of learning, piloting, and evaluating resources. So here you can see that there were many steps in the vetting process, and we won't go through all the steps, but I wanted you to see that there were many steps in the vetting process. So some included meetings I had with the team principal, Robin Wagner, so I could share ideas with her and get feedback from a principal point of view. Other instances, including large groups of teammates who sat in on presentations. Each detail is not something I will list at this time, but this visual gives you an idea of the length of the process and the various details. However, I will show you on the next slide some of the major components of the vetting process. All right, I shared with you previously a table showing our K through 5 math leadership team representatives. That group met in the fall to level set our purposes, our goals, our priorities, and our look-fors to determine the best math resource for our students. Part of that time together included protocols and small groups that helped us break down the following question pieces at a time. What are our philosophies around math instruction in Gahanna, and what experiences do we believe are essential for students, families, and teachers? Also, what are our need to haves, or want to haves, and what would give us pause if we saw it? These protocols helped us leave that day with broad and specific details from grade level teams, which I and 2 math coaches worked to synthesize K through 5 to create one common rubric from which we would evaluate math resources. For some details we needed clarification on, we circled back to MLT members to make sure we had accurately captured their priorities and sentiments. I personally worked hard to ensure that we included best practices and research-based components. And then from that work, the outcome was a rubric that had 6 focus areas. And within those 6 overarching areas, there were actually 42 different points that fell within them. They had a lot that they felt was very important, and we made sure we looked at all of it. So it was important that we each had a common understanding of what our needs and wants were, and that we had a tool to help us stay focused on what those needs and wants were as a team. This was especially important because we knew there would be a lot of bright and shiny packaging that could easily distract from looking for sound mathematics. So once we had our rubric, I was able to give preliminary reviews to several resources with the goal of narrowing it down to the top 3 for the vetting team to review further. I first looked at Ed Reports, a not-for-profit national review committee of K-12 instructional materials. This is many districts go to when beginning to evaluate resources. I researched the top-rated curricular tools and met with representatives from each one for formal representation using the team-created rubric and the details to drill down to the most favorable resources for what we needed here in GJPS. Additionally, I held then 2 after-school optional resource open houses at Clark Hall for any teacher to come and look at the 8 different curriculums I was receiving information on. Sample materials were organized for each resource at each grade level. Papers accompanied each resource that I asked teachers to use to write down the components they noticed were part of our wants and needs, as well as what would give us pause if we saw it. And about 30 teachers attended those 2 sessions. In addition, I sent out a Google form link and asked if there were any resources anyone wanted me to get review materials for to take a closer look that they had not already seen represented. I did receive 1 response with 1 additional resource name. So that was added to the bank of review. And so to kick off the review before drilling down, 9 resources were considered. So when synthesizing all feedback from the vendor presentations, as well as the teacher notes at the open house, there were 2 very obvious frontrunners. There was no third that was close, so our process narrowed to 2 resources at that time, Reveal and Bridges. For each, the vetting team, let me go back to this one here, sorry about that. For each, the vetting team was involved in all steps. So that 9 review process, I used the feedback and the goals and the asks of the team to help evaluate, to drill down. Everyone was not asked to go through that whole process of 9, but I held those open houses in case they wanted to come, they wanted to see, and they wanted to give that feedback, which they gave wonderfully. For each, so the vetting team was involved in all next steps. Once we got down to our 2, we had vendor presentations from each resource. Then we had 2 review phases. On the first focusing on Reveal. This included additional learning about the resource with teammates, an observation in an area district, Q&A time with those area district teachers, access to physical materials as well as the digital dashboard, and a few weeks to pilot lessons with our own students by our own teachers. At the end of that phase, teachers completed a Google form that was a digital version of our rubric to evaluate numerically and give narrative feedback in boxes as well. Phase 2 then was dedicated time to Bridges, which we each went through the exact same process, an area district observation with Q&A time with those teachers, piloting lessons with our own students, and our vetting teachers' evaluation on a Google form that represented our rubric. So you might have noticed that investigations was not included in that final review. That was an option we explored, but through a variety of data reviews as well as our teachers' feelings, we decided we were comfortable with finding a different core tool to meet our needs. So this graph here shows you one of the questions asked of MLT members early in the process. 44 teammates responded after gaining the thoughts of their building grade level team. So the MLT reps filled out this survey after talking with their grade level teams. So, as you can see, about 70% of teachers fell on the side of in favor of no longer using investigations, with over 45% of those teachers rating at the highest level for no longer using investigations. When asked to give comments about why they scored the way they did, teachers had some nice things to say about investigations, but overall felt it just wasn't meeting the mark. In addition to many comments given, one trend was that there were too many instances when we needed to supplement or pull in other resources to give students better experiences and deeper understanding. So here you can see the average results of the rubric evaluations based on a 0 to 3 scale, comparing Reveal to Bridges outcomes. In purple, you can see the 6 categories that the 42 areas of review fell under, so we weren't going to go through all 42, right? But we'll go through the 6. Each category line items were averages, And that is the number you see for each resource. So the average that came from the alignment details, the average that came from teacher experiences, et cetera. At the bottom, you can see the final averages of each resource. With both scores in the 2 to 3 range, we felt confident that we reviewed 2 resources that captured the qualities we were hoping to find in a resource. From the Reveal to Bridges comparison, you can see that Bridges was evaluated higher than Reveal, and that comes to more than a 21% favorability. While we had a lot of line item quantitative data, I wanted a means to capture in the end numerically the qualitative overall feeling of our vetting teammates. So I asked this question about each resource. To what degree do you feel this resource supports our GJPS philosophies around the essential components of math instruction and student, teacher, and family experiences? As you can see on a 0 to 10 scale, the average response for Reveal was a 5.45, while Bridges was a 9.2. Finally, teachers gave comments as to why they scored the resources the way they did. I then asked them, as a final question, just coffee chat. I said, if you were sitting over coffee with a friend and we're telling them about this whole experience, what would you say? Just say it. And here are a few quotes I intentionally chose because they encompassed different themes of the given feedback. So one teacher said, as it relates to Bridges, my students were engaged and immersed in our lessons. They didn't want to stop learning math. We love it. Also, in regards to Bridges, I feel like the math is deeper. Our goal is to grow mathematicians and excite them, and I feel Bridges does that. Also, originally, I was more drawn to what Reveal had to offer. But as we dug more into Bridges and went into the site and tried some lessons out, I've switched my thinking. I feel like Bridges has a lot to offer, and I also think the extra year to transition slowly, number corner first, then the rest, and I'll get to that next, will be especially helpful and less overwhelming to teachers. Also, so excited for Number Corner. There is so much of an opportunity here for discussion and ahas from students. We have needed a fluency routine for a long time. And then finally, love the game and activity options for kids provided in Bridges. Love that there are games that can be sent home for students that do not require many materials other than the directions, easily accessible for our families regardless of socioeconomic status. I am a little nervous about the preparation and organization that would go along with Bridges. And I wanted to be transparent and share that last piece of feedback. The things that we love are that it's so comprehensive, and the things that we love is there's so many things we can use with our kids. So that means it's really comprehensive, and there's a lot of things we can use with our kids, right? So there's that double-edged sword piece. And so there is that initial year just wrapping your brain around the prep, right? Like, okay, so what are the material? What do I need for that game again? What am I doing while they're doing that? So there is that piece, and we've got what we feel to be a great PD plan of touch points along the school year to front load that learning to support the teachers with that. So I just wanted to talk through a couple points here on this slide. So one of the teachers commented on how she was actually glad that there would be a 2-year rollout. So we'll get to that on the table here. And first, looking at the bullets above, the Bridges Mathematics program has different components to it. 2 components that kind of feed side by side. One is called Number Corner, and that's for 20 minutes a day, and that's more of like the fluency component. A lot of visualizations are introduced at that time. It really front loads a lot of the work that happens later in the core. It has a huge focus on pattern development and noticing those patterns and the continuation. And there's a lot of consistency in Number Corner, what they're called workouts. There are 5 every week you do, 1 a day, and then they cycle back through the next week. And those are very consistent K-5. So a teacher, if you move grade levels, you kind of get Number Corner. If you're a student going through K through 5, you get Number Corner. If you're a principal walking in, you know what you're looking for regardless of the classroom. So very systematic in that regard. So Bridges right now is going through, as every resource does. Every few years, they, best practices come out, they tweak, they get teacher feedback. We like this part, but it would be really nice if, that kind of thing. So they collect that for those few years, and then at some point, they make their update. So Bridges is in a Bridges 3 update at this time. And right now, they're releasing their Number Corner, 3rd edition. None of this is an overhaul. It's just what they say, it's an upgrade, right? So it's just a refinement. It's making their online platform more user-friendly, those kinds of things. So the plan would be that we would have Number Corner 3rd edition for next year, and finally have this separate fluency component that we have been talking about and wanting for a long time at elementary, and getting that going. Side by side with that, we would still have then investigations as a core resources, as well as all of the resources in our current curriculum maps. There's, as I shared with you, a trend in the comments was, we have to pull in some other things with investigations, some things we think might be a little richer, and that's been a lot of our MLT's work and my work over these last few years. So our maps are actually pretty detailed. Yes, you could do this in investigations. Here's this other activity that aligns beautifully based on a picture book lesson or something like that as well. So teachers would continue that for that core piece for one more year while they learn the Bridges Number Corner piece. Also, in addition, to help the learning process and to help a fuller district-wide implementation the following year, we would have 10% of our classroom teachers, that's a Bridges rule, they will support 10% for piloting. And so we've obviously got a lot of really interested teachers in doing that, who are some amazing teachers. And so knowing very clearly that the purpose of that would be, like I said, to support that implementation, to be big thinkers, to be problem solvers, to be collaborative, to give feedback, to be someone that feels confident and a little more experienced when everyone else would implement and can say, yeah, that's fine, come on in my room, come watch. Yeah, or yeah, let's Google Meet over that at lunch. I'll explain that piece to you. And so just building a little more capacity in our teachers and building that confidence early.
Sharon, can I add one piece to this? So just to add a little bit more to what she's saying, so we have a 2-year implementation for Bridges, again, because Bridges core they'll be working on that update, and so it won't be available until the following school year, but it actually works to our advantage, because just like the presentation we had earlier this year with literacy, where there's new research that's out there, best practices updates, that's what Bridges is doing on their math program, updating their core resource to be aligned to the best practices, to be more relevant for students. And so that's the reason why they're a year off on it being available for us. But again, it works out to our advantage because we are currently working through those shifts that we're making on the literacy side. And as Mrs. Elliott said earlier, again, capacity of our teachers, of what they can take in, what they can learn, and be able to implement with quality with our students. We're being mindful of that. So they'll be learning about numbers corners and be bringing that into the math classroom, while they're also learning the literacy changes and shifts that we're having. So in the end, the teachers were pleased with having that 2-year rollout, because then they feel like they'll be able to take in the new learning a little bit more effectively.
Thank you, Tia. Mm-hmm. I'll also add that if you adopt Bridges, you also adopt the Number Corner piece. However, Number Corner can be a standalone resource as well, and some districts just get Number Corner only, and they use it with whatever their core curricular tool is. So there's nothing in conflict. There's nothing that promotes a certain way over another. And I was very clear. I asked some folks with Bridges, nothing in Number Corner is given with the assumption that they've seen it in the core already. So every time they see it Number Corner assumes it's the first time you've seen it. So if what you're using in your core hasn't gotten to coordinate grids yet, it's okay. Number Corner assumes this is the first time you're seeing it. And if your core curriculum did already do coordinate grids, that's fine, because what we're going to do is something over here a little different with patterning and fluency with it as a context. So it's okay to use something else. A lot of districts do use another core with it. I also reached out to some people in my curriculum community that have my role in other districts who we have several area districts in Central Ohio who use Bridges. And I just called a couple of them and I said, hey, I know there's this update coming. Like, what do you think about this idea? Is it even possible before I even take this to the teachers, right? Because I wouldn't want to take an idea that we just know wasn't a good one. And even if we love the resource I talked them through about this 2-phase kind of thing, knowing when we'd have accessibility to the core. And literally both of them stopped and said, honestly, I kind of wish we had just done it that way. I think it's going to be just much more accessible to your teachers. I think they're going to understand it deeper from the start, and I think it's not going to feel as overwhelming as some teachers feel with the prep, because they just have time to think about it in chunks instead. So that is the reason of this 2-year rollout proposal, and that at the end, and then in year 2, which would be 24-25, they would already have the number corner component under their belts and now ready to pick up Bridges Core. And we would have already had a team of pilot teachers having already done Bridges Core as well.
Can I say one other thing?
Please.
One other thing that we forgot to mention, that this information was shared with the vetting team before they were had the presentation for the tool. So they knew going in that that if we went with Bridges, it would have to be a 2-year rollout.
Yeah, that was very, very clear from the start. Like, caveat, you need to know. And at first, they were like, oh, okay. And then as just time went on, they said, I feel better about it, to be honest. So the feedback there was actually positive. Okay, almost done here. Okay, so this is a document I believe you have access to, and if not, there's the link on the bottom right for it. This is just a document prepped for your usage if you want to know more, right? And there are these different categories going down the left. If you want to know more about specifically a number corner, if you want to know about different resources for families, research is at the top, etc. So there's just some light reading and watching for you if that moves you. And now we'll enter the Q&A portion, but first there are just 2 things I want to mention because they weren't part of the slides, but we definitely want to make sure that we are mindful of our students' achievement along the way and the impact of a tool, right? And so luckily, now we have MAP that can really be helpful with that. So our intention would be, we'll have had 2 years of pre-Bridges data under our belt, and then Bridges data along the way after we've had time to implement. So MAP would be that metric that we'd use. And the great thing about MAP and multiple assessments throughout the year is we can use it in different ways. We could do a spring to a spring. We could say, what is the growth in our pre-Bridges years from fall to spring to our Bridges years, fall to spring. So that we have a lot of flexibility with how we can use MAP to help us evaluate that impact. We'll say one thing we're always mindful of in curriculum is we know there is such thing as, it's very real, implementation dip. As people learn, they may not get through all the units that first year. It's just a reality. And I would be very clear with our teachers, like, we're going to do our very, very best, but it's real. Like, that is research-based. An implementation dip is real. We don't want it, obviously, but if it happens, we'll be better the next year and we'll keep going up from there. And then the second piece I want to make sure I mention, I talked about how Bridges Core has that component and then the partnered number corner component as 2 pieces. Bridges has a third resource, also a standalone resource called Bridges Intervention that I talked about at the fall SLA meeting. Bridges Intervention is something we've already had because it is standalone. It's a little bit different of a purpose. It does align very beautifully if you have the core tool too. It'll say in the core tool, if a student needs more time with this, go to this lesson in Bridges Intervention. But you don't have to have the core tool to use Bridges Intervention. It can be standalone. So that is something that our math AIs are using. That's their core tool they are using at our K-8 math AIs. So we are in year 2 of using Bridges Intervention. Last year in year 1, there were definitely gains. We have some map data and comparison data there. The piece that was a little unique, especially at some buildings for that, is We know that last year subs were an issue, and we know that it was all hands on deck often in our buildings, and oftentimes the math AI, as well as anybody else that wasn't already with a classroom of kids, would need to get pulled from their typical role of the day to go be in a classroom. So there was more of that last year, and so that was definitely our first year. But I would say this year is the year we really want to take a look at like that fall to spring growth on our kids. So we'll make sure that we communicate that. We already obviously have our spring data, our fall data. Our spring window will close mid-May, and that'll give us time, and we'll put some data together and have that for you in June. Questions?
Okay, so I'm going to start over here. I know I have a few questions, but I'll start over here and then go over here, and then I'll do mine last. Mr. Manley, did you have any questions?
First, so appreciative of the vetting team and the leadership team. It was really nice to see all the names, and I appreciate the grid too, to be able to place where people are. So that's an impressive team, and that's exciting to see.
Yeah.
And it was exciting how you got in all the feedback and hearing the feedback and the process, really thorough process. I like just hearing about people getting excited and utilizing math, the way you're rolling it out, being able to have fun with it, and, figure out that you can use math for everyday problems and, interweave it in your whole life and every day. That's exciting. And, I don't really understand, to be honest, the fluency routine that you're talking about. And I can visualize and guess what you're talking about as far as how it builds on each step and each other. And I like that you can use the one program and the other program together or separate, the flexibility. So, but if you could speak to that a little bit more, so I don't have to guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dion. So Number Corner has a new focus, let's say a new context every month for each grade level. Within that, you have your day one, your day two. There is a visualization, and I would love to share more in depth to give you more of that visual, because it's a very visual program and time of day. So there will be a dedicated space on every wall in the classroom, and every classroom that has the 5 different, like I said, they're called workouts. So one has to do, one of the workouts for every grade level, they're counting something all the time. And so whether you're counting by ones, or you're counting those things by twos, or by fives, or you're counting them by fractions, or you counting them, you can see how things would grow over time. But then you are also representing those things with some kind of visual model, and that's another day. And then you're building on that on a chart. And I wish I will absolutely follow up with more visualization for you and all of you. But so then you're charting, or you're going line item by line item and seeing how these visualizations, or whatever the context may be, grows. And so then you're pulling in patterns, and then you can be making predictions, and what would be tomorrow perhaps, or okay, then what could be 7 days from now, and you're really getting at that flexible thinking piece. And so there are 5 different workouts depending on your grade level. And so Day one would be one workout. Day 2 is another. Day 3 is another. But what you're doing in those workouts is all related. And then, so you've gone through your 5, then day 6, you're back to that first workout again, the activity type. But you're doing something, you're growing with it, right? And so by the end of the month, your board is full. And then you're at a new context, so now you're pulling in a new context. Maybe it's shapes. Maybe it's time and money. Maybe it's, they have, our third graders are working out of input-output tables and doing things to really develop, I think, of our 6th grade content ratio tables, even though they're not assessed on ratio tables, but certainly that's what they start to build even that young, and they get it, 2nd grade, one of the daily workouts is the use of arrays. That is a tool that is a 3rd grade standard because they use it through multiplication. But with 2nd grade, they do it through repeated addition, but they pull that visualization of an array in all year long. So they get to third. Like right now with investigations, we spend a lot of time just on what is an array in third grade, let alone pulling in how can we develop our math multiplication skills with it. Well, they don't need time for those lessons. They can just get to the good math. Once they hit third grade, they've seen an array for all of second grade already through repeated addition to support their grade level standards. So,
Soriano, I don't think you need to follow up. I think it's actually linked in the document that you gave us.
Thank you for that reminder, Brawl. Yes, yes.
So that one-page document, if you click on the link for the very last slide, there's the link to that page, and on that page itself, it'll take us to what Mrs. Soriano was trying to verbally describe, but we can actually see it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dion. Yeah, if you see this slide and on the bottom right, click here for the okay, yes.
Any other questions from you, Mr. Mealy? Mrs. Coates, any questions?
I just wanted to say, I mean, I love that you really gathered different perspectives from those that are going to be teaching, doing the work. It seems like you really thought through the change management and the professional development that would come with that. The pace of the learning, I really like that you were sensitive to the pace of what our teachers need to intake. And I like that you gathered feedback from outside the district on the implementation pacing. Mm-hmm. What were some of the feedback you received from the other school districts using this program in terms of how they were able to move the needle?
Great question. Thank you. Up here in another district, a third district, he told me after a year or two in implementation that, the teachers got their feet wet, and then some of the things that they were still asking about, he just coordinated with another district and had like an online Q&A with those other teachers. And he said it made the biggest difference because the teachers were able to support those teachers, answer their questions from a really veteran lens. And what's really nice is already some of our teachers have met just down the road and been in classrooms of teachers who have already implemented, and were lovely and open doors, and so just to have those kind of relationships to establish with some other districts, it's definitely, I feel, to be a perk. I love that there are so many I don't really have area districts that use investigations, but so many area districts use Bridges. And with our secondary math tool, CPM, we have several districts in the area who use CPM, and we've created over the last few years ourselves a Central Ohio Collaborative where we bring PD to us. We're constantly, we have ongoing meetings throughout the year to support each other and support our teachers. Our coaches go see other coaches and learn from them. So I'm really excited about the potential of relationships with other districts who have the experience.
Well, that's wonderful. What about with the student growth in math, like moving the needle with student success? Like those have been implemented.
Will you talk a little bit about, because when, as Ms. Soriano had mentioned, the teachers got to go and visit some of the other, like another district that is using it, and they did have time, right, to speak with those teachers. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Because they spoke about what the kids were doing with the math, like what were they seeing with the kids?
The improvement they saw.
Yeah,
Since
yeah.
Bridges started.
So when the lessons were over, a lot just kind of Q&A'd together while the kids were working, and gave them just a lot of different tips or a lot of things about management of certain ways, and said, you know what, we used a student folder for this, or I had group folders, and then my kids could get right to work because they came over here and picked this up, and then they had more time with the activities themselves. So a lot of things about management for the benefit of kids, to give them more time with the content.
Did they see scores increase? Those that were maybe and I'm not going to use the proper language,
Sure.
the lower
Sure.
fluency in their math, rise so many points or so many grades above?
Yes, I have a friend who teaches in another district that I haven't even tapped into in this conversation yet, and she, I just said, just be straight with me, even before all this process started. And she said, they use MAP. She said, all my kids in MAP are hitting data that I just didn't expect so early in the year already. And that was when they shifted tools. So she did see that difference from a previous tool to when they moved to Bridges. with map data exclusively. Yeah, definitely saw an increase.
Are you, I don't want to ask your question for you, but are you wondering if there are other districts who were using investigations and switched to Bridges?
Not so much investigations, but those that are using Bridges are their success stories of they were able to see a big shift in their math scores, whether that's at the testing level or.
Yeah, just that achievement piece overall. I can say, so I can get more specific data. I've talked with them in broad generalities. They're happy with their data. They're not looking to vet and move on. One district I spoke to, they were actually up for a review year, and their teachers unanimously said, we're good. We don't want to review anything else. And people at their district level were happy because the results were wonderful, and they were glad that they could just stick with what they had because it's working. But I'm happy to get some more historical comparison data from the growth they saw, if they have that between pre-tool to current tool.
Questions over here? Okay. Any questions over here? Mrs. Moore, do you want to go first? Or Mrs. Horn? Go ahead, Mrs. Horn.
So I agree with them. I mean, overall, I love seeing the charts with the whole timeline, so very well done. How does Dreambox fit into, I know you mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the middle school, but how does it fit into how we're utilizing that as part of our overall toolbox?
Yes. So Dreambox is a tool that is an online platform that is based for students to be very independent. In fact, they don't want other people chiming in and helping because it skews Dreambox being able to read what a student can really do accurately. And so it's an adaptive platform, so it's really targeting where it analyzes what students need within certain math domains and gives them lessons at that point in the progression. So that's a little bit different than a tool that sticks to your grade level standards for the most part, like a core curriculum resource. And then obviously there's ideas for differentiation that are embedded within, which was a perk our team really loved to see as well. But overall, the independence piece is the focus there. It also gives teachers an opportunity to make sure, one of the things that they like is they know that their kids can go do something when they're not, working with them at the small table, and they know it's quality. They don't feel like they're putting them on busy work. The kids don't receive it as that way.
So how is that different than the intervention tool? So like you talked about the Bridges intervention.
Yep.
So are those used in conjunction with one another, or is one chosen over the other?
So in Dreambox, every student has a Dreambox license.
Right.
Every student's within Dreambox. The Bridges intervention is something different. How we're currently using it is it's a pull out, right? So our math AI has a small group of students, and they're working maybe 5 at a time on something really targeted based on placement assessments, and that these daily activities are really intentional to that drilled down skill they need. And then on day 5, there's a progress monitor check. How are they doing? And then they pick it back up the next week in the progression. So it's just really different purposes. I mean, overall achievement end game, but the uses are very different.
And I'll just add again, so Dreambox is again another supplement. It would be similar to kind of like extra practice or homework practice for the student, just something that they could do independently. So if a teacher has maybe like stations set up and like Mrs. Suriano said, they might be working with a small group of students, then another small group of students can log into their Dreambox and just do some independent practice on a skill that's connected to where they are currently, that then the teacher can look at that data to kind of see how that's progressing, but it's meant to be kind of that repeated practice type of tool.
So then for next year, we would still be using investigations as our core.
As the
right?
core,
So
yes.
are we going to have to extend our license for that another year?
Yes.
As well as,
Yes.
are we proposing Bridges for like a 2-year, 3-year, like I guess
So
the
the purchasing details with Bridges is actually a really favorable model in my mind, because you purchase it and you're finished. So there's no like at the end of 6 years you renew and you pay every single year. Once you're a user, you're a user. So buying number corner for next year.
And the pilot just gets automatically added into that, so we don't have to pay for the 10% pilot?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
And
And we
who's
just
the
have the one
parent?
additional year of investigations to get us through, and then after that, we're done with investigations.
I think it's important to note, it's something that was attractive to me a few years ago with Bridges. This is a nonprofit, is that correct?
Yes, it certainly is. Thank you, Dr. Deagle. One thing that stood out loud and clear was, one of our reveal was a big box company, and there's a lot of big authors that contribute, and a lot of things, and there's a lot of really fantastic components about it. But it was, people even realized in the presenters, in the presentations, in the morning we had reveal and they loved it, right? And then in the afternoon we had Bridges and they were like, this is so different. Like, it was like geeky and mathy, and you know what I mean? It wasn't about, like, the morning felt a little more like, let's show you all the cool things you can do on this online dashboard. And Bridges was like, just thick with math, and it really it kind of excited everybody. They're like, this feels good. Like, this is math. It's not, you don't need all the glitz. It's about the math. And so they're very the not-for-profit piece is huge, because like, math is what they do, and it's all they do. It's not a company who tries to create textbooks on a bunch, let's do the AP science texts and the elementary school math curriculum. It's their focus. Yes.
Any other questions, Mrs. Warren? Okay, Mrs. Mooring?
Let me tell you, tonight is a very different night than, was this September 27th, 2016, when I have this page of notes from when investigation was presented, and I literally was almost ill, right? Because the concept of math, it's the language of numbers, right?
Yes.
And so the thought that we were going to introduce something quickly, right?
Yes.
And then go on to something else and then go back to it. And you don't learn to read that way, right? Why did we think math was going to be successful that way? That's what I was thinking, right? But I thought, you know what? I'm not an educator. So I am so much more confident about this one. One, because it almost presents it as a language, right? With that number corner. It's visual heavy, and that's where you can, the concept of math most people avoid because they think it's so ambiguous. But when you're adding that visualization to it does really make it more of a language. And I don't know what link it was in, but the I do, we do, you do concept that they promote throughout that curriculum, it just makes so much sense, right? We're doing it together. You do it with me watching, and now you go do it. I just think that makes so much sense with math in particular, right? Because to just present a concept and then turn it over is just very difficult. So I like it. I just, again, because of the visualization, I also think it helps English language learners and dyslexic folks, right? So that's why I like the heaviness on the visualization. And I think the process you took is amazing, and I appreciate the work, and I think it will be successful. So I'm thankful.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. I will tell you, to add to that, our EL teacher who was on the team, she was really digging into all these resources, because everybody touts that we have differentiation for this population and this, and it's all just, so many things are just good practices, period. And she was just really, really supportive of the things she saw in Bridges, and she said, no, this is different. This is for English language learners, not just more good teaching of math. She was a very heavy endorsement for me when I spoke with her. One thing I've not mentioned, and then we'll be done. my cohort, is I didn't put it on here. I didn't have much information at the time when I submitted my presentation. But in just this last week, I knew it was coming. But just this last week, I attended a presentation on it. They are also adding brand new a piece called Concept Quest, and that is for enrichment. And so at every grade level, 2 through 5, chapters 1 through 7, there are 8 chapters at every grade level. 1 through 7, there are enrichment tasks, and they're hard. They're amazing. They're so cool. I got a lot of samples this week. But those are at every single grade level. And Bridges' message is, this is not for the high group. That's not what this is about. This is for every student to access. Some kids might get to go farther with it and what they can do, but everyone has an entry point into these tasks. And so we're really, really excited. Our gifted coach and I watched the webinar live together and sat and talked about it after. So we're really excited because they're going to be pushing that into the Bridges 3. That updated, and so that will be included in the cost for us and not something extra to purchase. So we're really excited about that.
Go away yet.
What's that?
I said, don't go away yet, because
Hello, Mrs. Pickle Antonio.
it's nice to go last because most of my questions have already been answered.
Okay.
But just a couple additional questions. So I know there was the chart on here with the observation with Bridges at New Albany, it looks like.
Yes.
Is that,
Yes.
did you also, I mean, it looks like you also observed a district
For
using
Reveal? We
but
did.
The chart wasn't on here.
No, I just was giving that as
Okay.
an example of more of the process that we
Okay.
went through, and that teachers visited their own grade levels at assigned times and had time to observe, time to Q&A, time to plan back at our district, that kind of thing. There's a lot of moving parts. So
I think the overall question really is, well, but of the 9
Mm-hmm.
different programs that you started with, are there area districts using all 9 of those? Or is it
maybe
really
some area districts using some of them. A couple of them are newer, or newer or more updated. There are there's another district I've been in a lot of collaboration with right now because they're also vetting, also presenting to their board this month as well. Bridges is one of their finals as well. And then their second one is a newer resource too. Reveal is a newer resource. It's just come out in the last couple years. I think COVID, I mentioned how they're kind of on a cadence of every few years they give their update. And I think the pandemic really got in the way of all work that was on a schedule. And so when we came back, everyone picked it up, right? And so there was a lot of updates and new resources all at once because everyone who was scheduled during the pandemic did it, and then the people who are going to be scheduled to do it that year anyway did it. So that's why I don't know about as many area districts and what they've currently, if they've recently adopted things. But
are there other area districts? I assume there are some still using investigations.
I'm not aware of many around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think like I said, most of my other questions were answered, particularly what the recommended plan was going to be with the investigations and with the overlap, but that all makes sense. But I guess my last question is, I know you talked about education for our educators.
Yes.
What is the education, or have you started to think about what is the education going to be for families?
Yes, absolutely. So I've been talking with Bridges about that as well. And that is a piece too where I would be excited if we were able to have this resource to partner with other districts and learn from them as well. But even on our end, we know we would want to encourage family math nights, right? Or what are some videos we could put together for families? I already know that there are already included in the resource things like family videos, strategy, posters you can share, different newsletters that give the visualizations at the beginning of every unit of what they can anticipate coming up, questions they can be asking at home. A silver lining of the pandemic is a lot of development was done. To Dr. Deagle's point, this is a not-for-profit, and the focus is on the math. They took, as a company, like I say company, but this cohort, and they digitized all their lessons. So their teachers didn't have to spend their time doing that. They could spend time in delivery. So all the templates were already there and you could be dragging and dropping them and they feel it was over in your live lessons online. And whereas, our teachers, everyone was trying to develop all these things together and share and, but they hit the ground running and picked that right up, and just speaks to them and their level of like dedication to the work. But, the support to the family piece as well. Then coming out of that, they have a whole page of here's things you can do at home. If you're at home, here you can do this, and it's broken down by grade level. I will tell you, there isn't as much for Number Corner as there is for the core. But certainly giving just updates in general and things like that to our families, we would for sure be doing those in a sense too. I'm still working through the thought of over time, though, when to give a big launch and a family math night and all of that. I'm thinking probably more when a core, when the whole component's present, but to be determined.
Sharon, if I could add also, with us bringing Community University back next year, that's a great opportunity
Yes.
for us to have a session for parents on the new tool that would be coming the following year.
Last question.
Sure.
You kind of addressed at the beginning the alignment between Bridges and what we have at the middle school and high school level, which is CPM.
Yes.
But I guess if we could circle back to that, and then the question kind of is, I don't want to throw us into a discussion about something that we're not talking about yet, but
Okay.
when will we be when will you be looking at middle school and high school again? And does Bridges or these other companies, do they do beyond K-5?
So Bridges is K-5. I can tell you now that when you ask Bridges what is a secondary resource that most closely aligns with you, they will say CPM. And when you ask CPM, what is an elementary resource that you think most closely aligns with you, they say Bridges. The second part of your question is in terms of the secondary vetting. That will be next on the docket, right? And time for them to have those conversations. I can tell you right now, currently, our current tool, CPM, they're in the middle of their updates, and so I can answer that as long as you would want. But yeah, that's definitely on the timeline as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think we have asked a lot of questions of you, so we appreciate a few things. One, appreciate that we had the materials ahead of time so that we could
Sure.
process it. There was a lot of information for us to process, so it was very helpful to get the materials ahead so we could do that. Two, thank you for such a thorough presentation. And then three, thank you for answering lots of questions from all of us. I don't have to tell you how important it is that we make sure that we are choosing the very best tools for our educators and our students. So thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. I know. We're going to go to IT next, I think, right? Yep. We're going to Mr. Blackwell.
Of the board. Tonight I'm just going to briefly go over some of the purchases that we're trying to wrap up here at the end of the FY23 year. And I hope to have these on the agenda for your approval at the next board meeting, but we're still accepting quotes. It's possible that some of these may be at the next work session meeting. The first one is our firewall replacement. The firewall is a very important part of our network. It not only does what everybody thinks of a firewall doing, protecting against viruses and attackers and so forth, it is also the physical connection between our internal network and the internet. And of course, the internet is very important for all the things we do with all of our online resources and so forth. So I want to make sure this is a redundant system. So we have two physical devices. So if one fails, we don't lose our internet connection. And this is an E-rate purchase, and we have selected our vendor and filed our E-rate paperwork on this. But since E-rate does not cover redundant equipment or certain software aspects or service aspects of firewall, we'll be requesting only a 30% reimbursement instead of the typical 50% reimbursement that we're eligible for. And the other purchase that we're putting together is the classroom technology that I talked about at my last presentation, where purchasing the new classroom equipment for the construction part of Middle School East, the rooms at Middle School East that are being renovated or partially renovated that need to be ready for next school year in August, and also upgrading 2 elementaries to replace their existing projectors and screens and smartboards with the new interactive flat panel systems and the audio systems. And then we will also have our annual student Chromebook purchase. We're purchasing new devices for next year's 6th and 9th graders. Of course, like anything else, the per unit cost has increased. And we will be using ESSER funds for that purchase again. And we're also purchasing Chromebooks for our aides and AIs throughout the district. They currently use older student model Chromebooks that are ending their end of life. They'll no longer get security updates on those older devices, so we're looking to purchase 175 of those computers with a 13.3-inch screen, so it's a economical computer, but it has the same size and form factor as the teacher MacBooks. And probably the most fun one of these items is we're getting all new video editing computers for our award-winning Lincoln Live program. We worked closely with Mark Lowry and let him choose the devices he wanted. And we decided to go with iMacs again in blue and yellow, so school colors. Those should look really sharp when we move those over into the new high school and his new space there. And it's possible that that one will come in under the threshold to be on the agenda, but I just wanted to let you know about it anyway. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. Blackwell? Go ahead, Mrs. Mooring.
You give us a wonderful 5 to 7 year projection. Are all of these in line with in the same year of the projection that you most recently gave us? The financial projection?
We have originally had the firewall further out in a future year, and at some point we moved it up because our current firewall is not meeting our needs as well as we'd like. But I think that move was made before the latest revision of that forecast.
Latest forecast that we would have. I thought it was from last year. Would it be last year?
I think it was last year, school year that you presented it to us, but it's been pretty spot on
Right.
for.
It-
So I was just curious. Do we know?
Any other questions for Mr. Blackwell? Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to business office. Mr. Lofton.
Evening. Like to start off and talk about construction and give some updates on where we are with some of our projects. The high school stadium is moving along. Both of the bleachers are complete. The home bleachers was actually completed today. They had some things that they needed to finish up on, but it was completed today. The synthetic turf has started to arrive. They have completed the underground work, getting ready for that turf. So I think with the extended forecast of nice weather for the next 7 to 10 days, I think you'll start to see that turf go down. Moving on to Middle School East, Brasilia has started to move dirt and getting prepped for the summer work and getting that construction going. Blacklick Athletic, we're on schedule for the April installation of the sod on the east field, and also to continue to work on the tennis courts and install that asphalt that needs to go down the base course and then the top course, and then they will come and put the markings on and the paintings on and complete that this summer. And then Tuesday, we kind of hit a milestone. Out at Blacklick, we had a baseball game. We hit a milestone because baseball had a game, lacrosse had a match, and softball had 2 games going on at the same time. So it is starting to roll, and as soon as we get some of the other niceties put in, grass and getting everything, some more of the landscaping done, I think it's going to be everything that we thought it would be. So we're really excited about that. And softball won both their games. Just want to say that. The elementary schools over spring break, we completed the mulch installation, so the playgrounds are available for use. The pouring of the rubber surface will happen this summer once we get the right temperatures, and we would rather have the students be able to have access to those play structures through the remainder portion of the year, and then we'll do the rubber after school is out. Secured entrances, we talked about West today, so that's great. And then the contractor is on board, and he has started procuring those subcontractors and starting to buy equipment, installation of things. So we'll start to see that. We have a few meetings scheduled to get everything rolling as soon as school is out on the 25th. Pavement, today we had a bid opening for pavement, and it came in under budget, which we're all happy. And it's with some extended work that we're adding to it. So I think we were really happy with the prices we saw. We had 4 companies bidding on it, which was fascinating. They were all fairly close, but we were able we'll just now wait for the architect to go through and vet and make sure that they're comfortable with this low bidder, and then they'll give us a letter of recommendation, and then we'll present it to the board at that time. I believe it's going to be, we're hoping to put it on for the 20th. So. Yes. Yep. The chairlift at Royal Manor was installed over spring break. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the state inspector. They will go through and inspect it, and if it passes all inspections, we will be able to start using that on Monday, which is happy to see that finally get done. It took a lot longer than we had hoped. So that's all I have. Are there any questions?
We have one, but does anyone else have a question? You do? Go ahead.
Communicating with neighbors like at Middle School East before we started construction, and are we giving regular updates? Because, I mean, posts I'm seeing on social media would make me skeptical that people that back up to the schools are aware of what's going on, even though they received a mailer in December.
Yeah, I personally have met with 2 of those, 2 of the neighbors that are more on the north side, not on the south side of the school, that were, where the addition is actually going to be. Mm-hmm. They reached out, we reached out back out to them, and actually went out and met and kind of walked where everything would be. Seemed to be, really good response after we were able to walk it with them. So.
We also sent a communication out, would say, Eric.
No.
We also sent another communication out, I would say before spring break, to the neighborhood as well, letting them know that we appreciated all the support that we received and we were breaking ground. And I know that Brad has done a really good job of trying to connect with the homes as well that surround the school.
Any other questions? My question was actually about the elementary schools. Can you remind me, because I don't remember, the rubber that you talked about, that is, you said that's coming in the summer. Where will that actually be, and what additional accessibility will that provide for our kids?
So, without actually showing you a map of where it's going to be located, it's going to be located under the larger play structures to give access for students to get to there. Mulch is considered ADA acceptable. I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, it's really hard to, to move someone if they would happen to have a mobility issue into there. So that's why we try to do the rubber into those different areas. And we always run from the asphalt area to those to the play structures, we run just a walkway of that poured rubber so they can get through the whole area. So, yeah, it's much better. The poured surface gives more accessibility.
So do the staff in the buildings know now that that is coming this summer?
Yes, they do know.
Now?
Yes.
In addition to that, it's 4,200 square foot of rubberized surface, so about the size of a gym floor, which is very large, in conjunction with the paving. Like Scott said, I think through design, we've provided a lot. There may be some gaps. We want to follow up. We're talking to some of the staff about it as well, as far as maybe supplemental equipment to accommodate. We'll have our architect do one more review when we're done. And we also have a playground inspector as part of our risk management program that we'd like that person to walk through as well and just kind of evaluate it and give us any final thoughts to it. So we're trying to work through it. I think part of it too has been just the timing, and that has created questions. So
That's why I asked that. Do they know that now? Because I think not just that I understand the timing. The question is, do they know what is coming and when that's coming? Yeah, sounds like yes. So good.
I know that I'm going to be meeting with one principal next week to try to nail that down,
Okay.
so that they feel more comfortable with the schedule. So, and we're also talking to the contractors that's going to do the install, and we asked for a schedule from them just to verify as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. We will move on to communications. Mr. Starkey.
Good evening, Madam President and other members of the Board of Education. Tonight I wanted to talk about events. It seems like we're in event season for a lot of different people and a lot of different organizations, but our communications department certainly has our fair share of events this spring. Not that they're limited to this spring, but we just seem to have a lot as we round out the school year. We look at events a lot of times as ways for our community to interact with our district and vice versa, ways for us to learn from our community and our community to learn from us. Some of them just look different ways, and we really try and provide opportunities for people to learn in whatever way works best for them. If it's learning during a presentation or during a conversation, we look at different opportunities for that engagement. I wanted to highlight some of our events this spring. One last month, all of you were able to join us for our Gehenna Forum, centered around supporting our youth. We had about 50 to 60 community members there, in which they heard from our district leadership and as well as leadership from the city of Gehenna in terms of what we're working on, what's already in place, and what's coming in place to help support our youth as an entire community. We have the recording from the presentation that's online, and then today we posted many of the questions that were asked with answers on our website, and we will continue to fine-tune those answers and add answers as well, but today was many of those questions were posted on our website and shared in our newsletter that I normally call the Friday newsletter, but this week it's the Thursday newsletter. I wanted to highlight two events next week. On Wednesday night from 6:30 to 8 at the Dunkin' Donuts near Fresh Time on Hamilton Road is our next coffee and conversation. I know two of you will be joining us there, and that's a great opportunity for two-way engagement, to really hear from our community as well as provide feedback and learning opportunities both ways. So that's an exciting opportunity for us to interact with our community. The following night is our State of the Schools. Certainly excited about that. Because it's our showcase. It's our time to peel back the curtain and show our community about our district. And so that will be at 7 o'clock in the auditorium at Lincoln High School. And those two events are two examples of different ways we engage with our community through our events. One is more conversation-based and two-way engagement, and the other is more presentation where they can hear from our district leaders to get that information as well. So we're definitely excited about those two upcoming events. Tonight with us, we also have our GJEF co-executive chairs, Trish and Diana, and so I wanted to welcome them up so they can highlight their events. Similar to our school district events, they also have a lot of events going on this spring, so I wanted to give them some time tonight.
Hello to the school board and to the administrative team. I am so thankful that we have a chance to just say hello to everybody, and wanted to start out by saying thank you to all of you that were able to support us and come out to our gala that we had back in February. It was a great event, a great celebration, and what I love about that event is it really shows the community support that we have in Gahanna. The interaction with the local businesses, the parents, individuals, community members, the PTOs, and even alumni that donate auction items for us. It's really pretty cool what we have going on here in Gahanna. So, you know, as difficult as COVID was for all of us, we, as a foundation, we kind of learned some tricks. We were able to go to hybrid. We did an all virtual one year, and then we went to hybrid last year, and we did it again this year. And what's awesome about that is that we had 280 people in the room at Jefferson Country Club at an in-person gathering, and people had fun. But then we also had at least 260 other people outside of the room, out in the community, bidding on auction items. And so it was great to have people, maybe someone couldn't have a babysitter or they weren't available that night, but they were still supporting the students. And so that has been great. I think we can really continue to build on that model in the future. You know, we had people bidding on items that were not even in Gahanna. There were other communities, they were out of state. And you know, just one funny story is that, you know, two of the racing packages that we had, they were both purchased by people outside of Gahanna. And I wish they had called us first, because they came on Sunday to pick up their auction items. And, you know, the one guy came all the way down from Canton on Sunday, and he got an envelope that said that the tickets were going to be mailed to you. So, but what's really cool is that through social media and, you know, the internet, we are reaching people outside of our community, and that still supports our students. And so that's really cool for us. So after all of the hard work that we had with our volunteers, people here in the room, I'm sure the big question is how much did we make? And we were really pleased to say that we raised over $135,000 to support grants, to support our Fund a Need initiative, and to return back to all of the PTOs and groups that sold raffle tickets for us. So thank you very much to the whole community for that kind of support. And, you know, we don't really let the money sit for very long. You know, we raise the money one week, and then the next week we meet to spend it all. So Diana's going to give you a little rundown about that.
Thanks so much for having us. We appreciate it. And thank you, Kara, for speaking on our behalf in past meetings. For the grants, we just finished last month the Grants of Excellence, and that is a competitive application-based process and obviously supports innovation in the classroom. We have a wonderful committee, a grants committee, that's comprised of community members. And if there are any other community members that are interested, please let us know. And then also retired staff and GJEF board as well. So with the Grants of Excellence, we're in that process right now of pulling that together. And once the board approves the receipt of the money at the 21st meeting, I believe, April 21st, then we will be able to spend that. And then we have reserved some money for the fall so that when we have our mini grant cycle. Okay. So what we also have coming up is community partnership again with the What's Next job fair. But to take it back to right before spring break, we did have a summer job fair at the high school with loads and loads of teenagers looking for jobs and 25 businesses there to hire them. So it was really successful. The kids were excited, and we did partner with our wonderful Chamber of Commerce to have those businesses come and meet with our kids. And then the what's next is next week, and that is what's next after high school for our seniors who may not have a 4-year college in sight, or they may not know what they want to do. So we are going to have 17 businesses and community partners there as well. And we'll also have Columbus State and CTEC there. And they will be able to interact with our students and present what is available. And Tia is going to talk about.
I'm just going to jump in really quickly. So I know at the last month's meeting, Mrs. Elliott had spoken about the high school program showcase that was coming up. And so we did have that March 17th. We had roughly 10 of our business partners come into the district, and we actually started on main campus, and they were able to go in and visit a few of our programs that we have on site. And then we also then came over here to Clark Hall, and they got to see some of the programming over here. So as you can imagine, it is challenging to try not to schedule a full day for business partners, but also to try to get in as much as possible at the high school, and also working through the Bell schedule. So we were able to get into the Fab Lab, we got into DECA, and we got into our technology courses on main campus. Then here at Clark Hall, we were able to see Science Academy, and we actually went through all of the classroom spaces down at Eastland Fairfield to see our satellite programs. And then for the other programs that we weren't able to actually get into, we followed up with a presentation that kind of walked through what the other programs were, talked a little bit, showed some pictures, and talked a little bit about those programs that were available. And the idea, the intent of that is to bring our business partners in, for them to be able to see our students learning in action, for them to interact and connect with the students and the teachers, to hopefully generate ideas of ways that we can continue to build out those partnerships, and they can actually see what our kids are capable of doing, that then they can connect it to what they have available or might be able to do with them in their workplace, or how they might continue to come in. What we like about it is, then they help us to kind of really dream big about how to expand our partnerships, but also they start to make those connections with kids for what might be next for them. So it was a success, and we got some really good feedback from, our business partners that attended. So looking forward to continuing to explore those options.
And so I just wanted to talk about one last event that we have coming up in April. It's on April 27th. Kind of in the same vein as interacting with the students and businesses. April 27th is the 8th grade shadow day for our middle schoolers. And sometimes students don't have a parent, maybe the parent's workplace isn't appropriate for them to shadow them. And so we have some group shadow experiences set up. And, it'll be nice to have, it's for about 5 to 10. Actually, Turner Construction is going to host 20 students, where groups of students can go. They can tour their facility, ask their questions about career paths. And so we have lined up so far the Gahanna Police and Fire Department, Turner Construction, Grody Company, Abercrombie and Fitch, and the IEC, which is the Electrical Contractors Training Center. So I'm still waiting to hear from a couple other people, but the staff is getting ready to sign up their students for those group experiences. Do you guys have any questions for us?
Does anybody have questions? Mrs. Coates, did you have a question?
No questions. I just want to publicly thank the two of you. I know you have amazing volunteers, a lot who are here this evening, but it takes leadership to put on a gala like you did, with the success that it was, with all the details accounted for. And so just thank you very much for serving our district the way you do.
Very nice of you.
Mrs. Mooring, did you have a question?
I guess I would be interested in a little bit more of the feedback that you got from the high school showcase.
We have a board member who's assigned as a liaison to that group. So maybe when we have our board report out, we can do that then, if that I don't, I'm just
Yeah, yeah.
trying to be cognizant of time and efficiency. I don't know, Mr. Manley, if you were on that tour
Yeah,
or not,
okay.
but
I didn't
even if
wanna-
not, I guess we do have a board member that is a liaison to that, so let's save that for a report out if that's okay.
It was amazing. We got a lot of feedback, and yeah,
Wait.
that's good.
Thank you. Is that all right to do? Will you report out then? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mrs. Horn.
Are you still looking for other companies? And like, are you trying to solicit for the shadowing day? Are you looking for that, or is that something that you're really wanting to put off maybe more for next year?
So, first of all, one thing I did want to mention that Diana pointed out to me earlier today, with the 8th grade shadow, the last time that students were able to do Shadow Day,
right.
those students are seniors now. That's how long ago it's been. So it was 2019 when we first did a group shadow experience. I'm not sure, I have spots for about 50 to 60 kids right now. I'm not sure if they're going to get all filled up yet, but if they do get filled up, we could take more companies. I just don't know how that's going to go.
Or let us know for next year?
Yeah, yeah.
I will say though, just to add to that, like we are always looking for just job shadow opportunities. So specifically, this is for our 8th grade shadow day that we have for all 8th graders. But in general, as we continue to talk about our career exploration, we are always looking for companies for a job shadow opportunity.
I'm glad to hear that the group shadowing opportunities are expanding the way they are. There are a lot of students who just, well, one, they may not even be interested in what their family members do for a living, but two, there isn't necessarily somewhere for them to figure that out. So thank you for starting to build a program that is more one that is available for the district to help connect kids to those shadowing opportunities. I didn't have a question there. That was just a comment. Anything else? Anything else for Mr. Starkey? Okay, we're going to move. Oh, well, Mr. Starkey, did you have anything else? Okay. Okay, I think we're going to move to Human Resources. Mrs. Reed, thank you.
All right, President Pickle-Antonio, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to share about the work of Human Resources tonight. The first thing I would like to talk about is another one of our big rocks that's happening this time of year, and that is around staff evaluation. So before I get into the details around that, I just want to share that this, like many things, starts very early in the year with our wonderful Human Resources Specialist, Rebecca Hall, who has the task of monitoring all of these evaluations and where all of our staff members are in the cycle of evaluation. And she also notifies the supervisors to make sure that they are aware of where every single staff member falls in that cycle. So much like I shared last month regarding licensure, it is an extremely labor-intensive task. And a plug of something that might be coming in the future. It doesn't actually have to be done that way. There are systems that help us to manage that work. So we have been investigating those systems to help us create efficiencies in the department, and we are hopefully going to be sharing that with you very soon. So soon to come. We're excited about that. But back to the evaluations. Believe it or not, everybody doesn't get evaluated the same way in the district. We actually have 5 groups, essentially, that have 5 different ways or cycles that they are evaluated on. So for all of our administrators, they do receive an annual evaluation every year. If they are up for contract, though, they receive 2 evaluations in the year that they are up for contract. For our administrative professional staff, such as like administrative assistants, our specialists, our treasurers, office staff, technology coordinators, and managers, they receive annual evaluations every year. Our teachers have the trickiest evaluations of all, as you can imagine. So their evaluations are actually individually based on where they are in their contract cycle, and also based on their previous year's evaluation rating. So we have to take both of those factors into consideration in order to determine what cycle they're going to be on for evaluation. So all teachers do create a professional growth plan every year. However, some of them will be on what we call a full evaluation cycle, which means they'll receive 2 formal observations along with at least 2 walkthroughs. And then other teachers might be on what we call an off-year evaluation cycle in which they only receive 1 formal observation. So again, we look at all of that at the beginning of the year and calculate those and coordinate with Jill to make sure that our OTES 2.0 system is accurate and we know where our teachers are needing to be with their evaluations. The 4th group is our aides and custodians. That group receives an annual classified evaluation. And then the last group is all of the other classified staff members who are evaluated annually in their first 2 years and then every 3 years after that. So lots of different ways that evaluations are happening. Those evaluations have to be completed in order for us to get to the point where you receive contract recommendations on the board agenda in May and June. So in May, you'll be receiving those administrative and teacher contract recommendations, and in June, you'll be receiving the classified and administrative professional contract recommendations. So lots of work goes into the point where you see those contracts on the board agenda. So the contracts, the recommendations, the way that those work, all staff members have predetermined contract cycles. Those are all determined by Ohio Revised Code. So we monitor those as well. And administrators, the contract cycle for administrators is that well, let me back up. The contract cycle for administrators is actually going to change this year. Those of you who have been on the board for a little while might remember that several years ago we had predetermined contract cycles for administrators. We went away from that for a little while and went to the superintendent making the final recommendation about the length of contracts for administrators. So we've talked as a team and we've decided to go back to those standard contract cycles for administrators. So we are going back to that standard 2-year for the first year of their first contract. The second contract will be a 2-year, and then after that, 3 years. We also have teachers who are, based on our Ohio Revised Code, teachers receive their first contract as a 1-year, their second contract as a 1-year, and then it's 2, 2, 3, and eventually they are typically eligible for a continuing contract at some point. And then finally, the administrative, professional staff, and classified staff cycles are beginning with a 1-year contract, and then 3 consecutive years of 2-year contracts, and finally on to the continuing contracts. We've done a little bit of cleanup work the last couple of years because there were employee groups who really weren't even receiving contracts. So we cleaned a little bit of that up when we went back and did the administrative wage and professionals, the administrative wage and benefits, getting too late, you guys, wage and benefits guidelines book. So we cleaned that up with our administrative professionals. We still have a little bit of work to do with the secretarial staff and such, but we're on track to make sure that all of those are receiving the correct contracts each year. So that's it for evaluations. Just wanted to give a quick update as well on certificated hiring. I know you love getting this update. We have had 68 openings so far this year for certificated staff members. We have had 13 retirements, 12 resignations, 5 reposting of positions because they were interim hires. We've currently approved 3 leaves of absence for the entire year next year, so we're looking to fill those positions. 15 of our hires have been internal, and we have currently posted 14 new positions, which encompassed an actual 12 FTEs. So in the 5-year forecast, I believe we had originally allocated those 12 positions. They have now all been posted. And then we do have 1 position that we have determined we are not going to fill for next year. We unfortunately are losing Edna Wright next year. She is retiring as the high school nurse. And you may remember that with the intensive health needs that we had in our buildings during COVID, we determined we were going to use some ESSER funds to add a nursing position. We all know that we're going to be evaluating positions that are being funded through ESSER next year. So we brought the idea to our administrative team about not filling that position in anticipation of that putting someone in a really tough spot if we end up eliminating that position 1 year later. And our administrative team was supportive of that. It will essentially place us back to where our nursing staff was pre-pandemic. So Jen Korn will be looking at the staffing allocations for nurses, and we'll be looking at a model similar to, like I said, the pre-pandemic staffing number. And then finally, we have 40 positions that have been filled so far. You're going to have a bunch of those on the board agenda in a couple of weeks. I also believe that it's likely that 15 more positions will be finalized before we get to the board agenda in 2 weeks. So we're doing really well with getting those positions filled. We do have a few hard to fill positions. One of them we actually just filled, which is great. It was our high school family and consumer science position. Marcy Aiello was a rock star and sent us the name of somebody that she knew was graduating from OSU, and we were able to reach out, and he's amazing. We're super excited to have Miles McConaughey coming on board with us. The other positions that are a struggle right now, high school integrated science is a tough one. We're still looking for candidates for that. We have 2 high school ASL positions, our sign language positions that we are going to need to fill for next year, sadly, I know. So those 2 positions are tough ones. And then we have really struggled with OTs. Unfortunately, our special education staff has been working really hard to identify quality candidates for those positions, and they have done an amazing job of finding them. What is happening is the way that our current salary structure is set up, we do not offer any additional compensation for students coming out of college who've earned a PhD. Many of the universities are awarding students who have a bachelor's degree. They're not taking that step of getting a master's. They're going immediately to PhD, and we have no place on our salary schedule for a PhD. So the most I can award them is a bachelor's 150. So that's putting us at a significant disadvantage in terms of the salary that we are able to offer those OTs. So, that's definitely something we're going to be thinking about in the future in terms of being able to make some adjustments and more properly compensate those staff members. So special ed's working really hard to identify some additional staff members to get those positions filled. We are looking forward to classified hiring. We've been primarily focused on certificated, and so we have a couple of things that are going on right now that Adam Kunkel's working really hard on. We've been reaching out to our building subs, our alternative instructors, those who are hired through the ESC, to gather their intentions for next year to make sure we know if they're planning to return to us since they're annual at-will employees. We are also going to meet on April 12th to discuss with operations the needs for custodial grounds positions for next year. We have a meeting set for May 2nd with special ed to review where we are with student needs for next year so that we can make adjustments to our educational aid staffing. And then we don't have a date set yet, but we will also be meeting in May to talk about transportation staff as well. So that's the staffing update. I just wanted to also let you know Adam and I are planning on having a table at the State of the Schools for open positions to try to gather some more community. That was Dr. Deagle's idea, so thanks for that. We're going to definitely do that. I think that's a great opportunity. I also did want to point out, Mrs. Pickle-Antonio, I know you're waiting on OSU data. I didn't forget about you. I realized when I asked OSU to send data, they sent me December grads, and I think we probably need to compare total numbers, so still working on cleaning up that information for you. And I know we want to get out of here, but I'm going to tell one quick story. I just wanted to let you guys know we've been talking about the need for creating an educator pipeline, and I want to shout out one of our teachers, Carrie Barnes. Carrie is an intervention specialist at High Point, and I recently interviewed a recent grad. Her name is Erin Maloney, and she is a former Gahanna student, graduate. She went through our teaching professions program, did a lot of work with special education when she was a student here in Gahanna, even as young as an elementary student. And she pointed to a conversation that she had with Carrie when she was 9 years old, where it gives me chills, like, oh my gosh, where Carrie told her, you can do this as a job. This is my job. And she remembered the words that Carrie shared with her, and she's graduating as an intervention specialist this year, and she's going to be a rock star. So those words are meaningful, and we need people that are going to continue to promote this profession. So I just want to shout out Carrie for that wonderful, wonderful story that she gave us. So that's all for me. I will take any questions.
Mrs. Reed. Any questions? Go ahead, Mrs. Coates.
On the, thank you very much. Love the story. Is there any risk that we should be aware of for the nursing position not rehiring on the retirement, going back to like the pre-pandemic numbers? I'm assuming that it's just with COVID, not to the degree it was, like if the need is not there, but I just didn't want to make an assumption.
Yeah, correct. That's the reason that we wanted to have this specific conversation with our building principals, because we know the building is obviously where the impact is going to be, and we wanted to make sure that the principals didn't have any major concerns about us going back to those staffing levels, and they were in support of that. So we haven't identified any, specific concerns. Obviously, it'll spread the work, around to other people, which will increase the workload. We know that. We also are going to be talking likely about our clinic aid staff and trying to, make sure that we're utilizing that staff appropriately as well. So I think once we're able to work through all of that, that will also help those clinics out to run more efficiently and effectively.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Questions? Okay, thanks, Mrs. Reed. Ms. Wigging, special education.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us all back. I just wanted to share some highlights that you'll be seeing soon on the board agendas coming up later this month and possibly in May, that hopefully you'll move forward with approving. Each year since 2015-16, we have put on the agenda Text Help, which is Google Read and Write. It's a universal accommodation software program that we have for all students. Students can access that through their Google account both at home and at school. It provides features for students to access text in different ways besides just visually. It provides them opportunities for it to be read to them. It also provides accessibility such as speech to text, predictability, visual dictionaries, highlighting, screen masking, many things that they also see on their state test. So it's an opportunity that any student can have during instruction or independent work time, and we'll be having that on our next board agenda for your approval. This year it is at a rate of $1.89 per student, and that is up 9 cents from last year. Another motion that you will see is our annual renewal for Same Goal. Same Goal is our student management system for IEPs and 504s. We have had that since the 18-19 school year. Previous to that, we had another software company that actually stopped operating, so we were forced to switch companies at that point. That is being renewed at a rate of $2.39 per student. That's an increase of 14 cents per student from last year, and that is also based on our total enrollment, just not students who are identified as a student with a disability. Two other motions you'll see are for approval for staff to work our extended school year program. Extended school year is a program that we are required to offer for students who are identified annually through their IEP as students who need programming over extended breaks. Why it's called extended school year. We have operated this since I've been here in different ways. Last year we had 33 students who were eligible and attended. Not all students who are eligible attend, but 33 did. We were able to provide services to an additional 13 by adding them to existing groups and not increasing our costs. We'll do that again this year, first providing services to students who are eligible and then looking for opportunities to add additional students. Last year it included 14 days, 6.5 hours of staff, 4 staff per day. We will also, on the April board agenda, be asking for you to approve our current school psychologist to work additional cases for a staff member who is out on maternity leave. And instead of contracting with a private agency, we're fortunate that our current school psychologist will be able to provide the services to provide evaluations for students who are either homeschooled in our private schools or on the scholarship. That's the school psychologist that is currently on maternity leave, that our 7 school psychologists will spread the work out among them, and we'll pay them additional rate for doing those cases. Some things that I think are really exciting I want to share with you. we were able to have delivered 200 pine trees this week that are being planted at Gear Garden. So that's very exciting. Can't wait to see the pictures. I wasn't able to go yesterday. April is Autism Awareness Month, so I thought I would just share that with you. We are having our Family Resource Fair next week, April 13th, right before the State of the Schools event here at Clark Hall. On May 9th, Chapel Field is hosting Ability Games, which is very exciting, where we have students with disabilities and students without disabilities partnering together to play and participate in a variety of gross motor games. And finally, this week we are celebrating our paraprofessionals. It is Paraprofessional Appreciation Week. So I just want to shout out to all of our paraprofessionals for everything they're doing for our students and our staff in our buildings. Any questions this evening?
Is that all for Ms. Wiggy?
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, is there a motion to go into executive session pursuant to revised code 12122G 1, 4, and 9? I don't know if I'm counting that right. 8? Is that 8? I think we might, if we're able to put numbers, I realize that in the moment and then forget after. But G1 is for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, compensation of an employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints. G4 is for discussing, preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees. And then G8 is to consider certain confidential information, including trade secrets or applicants for certain types of economic development, assistance, or negotiations with other political subdivisions concerning such applications. Anyone want to make that motion? Thanks, Mrs. Horn. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Coates. Any discussion? Just in case there is anyone watching, when we go into executive session, we will be leaving from the live stream, leaving to go into a separate room. We will be coming back into open public session after executive session, but the only board action that we will be taking will be to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring? Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Motion carried.
It is 8:42 p.m. We will take just a couple minute break and then we will meet in a room back this way in executive session. Thank you.